I understand you love poetry.
I do, yes.
Have you written poetry yourself?
I have from time to time. I'm more of a reader and like an enjoyer, a basker. Like I just like to be with a poem and just read it. But I would not call myself a poet in any way.
How would you compare poetry to editing?
The link in, for me, the relationship between poetry and editing comes in tone and rhythm. That's all the poem is, and it's also the distillation of a large thought, a large concept. And there are poems that are more elaborate, but the poems that I gravitate towards are distilling complex human emotion and experience in as succinct of a way as possible, and that's through tone and like a Seamus Heaney poem, right? It's like you can just paint this amazing picture of a landscape and in a human emotion and the connection to that landscape in like 2 lines. And it's like the use of the tone of the words, the specific words that he's using to put next to each other that elicit kind of like I'm there, like I can taste the ocean air, the breeze coming off. You can just take you there immediately, but then it's also the rhythm with the words, it's the rhythm with the punctuation. And so for me, when I'm cutting, it's like, how do I make this feel so much deeper and greater than just a couple few shots next to each other? And then how do I deploy punctuation? Like I want this cut to feel like a comma, or this cut to feel like a period, or this cut to feel like a exclamation point. Like how do I use kind of this this poetic structure on a page and adapt it to a timeline? Like that, I mean, I could geek out on that forever. Like that, I just love that stuff.
We have a little exercise we want to try. I have
Okay.
a poem here, and we'll see how it goes. So, once when I was young and true, someone left me sad, broke my brittle heart in two, and that is very bad. Love is for the unlucky folk. Love is but a curse. Once there was a heart I broke, and that I think is worse. That's a poem by Dorothy Parker, a very short song.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you would edit to that. I don't know if there's a way to show it in our conversation without actually showing something on the timeline.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, that poem kind of has this almost like wave to it. Like the line breaks, and where those line breaks are very intentional, and where that the rhythm of the poem kind of lulls you into feeling that this heartbreak that was experienced is the thing, and then the end, and juicing that up. I can feel in the poem like it's getting juiced up, that the individual's heart was broke, and then all of a sudden at the end it turns and it's like, I broke a heart, and that's it, and now we're out. So you're like, well, tell me more about that. It's like, no, we're out. So for me, it's like that rhythm and the pace lulls you into sympathizing and feeling empathy for the person that's speaking, but then all of a sudden it gets turned around and the mirror is now on the person. It's like, I broke a heart. So for me, there's a lot of inspiration in that from a scene construction standpoint. Like if you want to pull the rug out on somebody, it's like lull them into like a rhythm, lull them into thinking they know what this is about, and then pull the rug out from under them. And the more you can lull them into thinking they know what this is, I feel like the more dramatic that turn will be. So that's kind of what I get from that poem, and the way that it's constructed. And then there's like some micro rhythm things in there that you can also dissect. But for me, it's kind of more of a scene construction exploration with that one, because it's like we want the mirror to turn. How can we accentuate that turned mirror as much as possible?
Are there certain directors that their films are like poetries, whether they're like haikus or different things, like the way they construct a shot, it's very poetic? Yeah,
I mean, the Maisel brothers do that great with like Salesman, incredible doc. And then, there's like your Ozus or Bresson or Tarkovsky. And Tarkovsky's father was like a pretty famous Russian poet. And so there's a lot of visual and rhythmic poetry that's just infused in their work. And even just like watching their work, you just feel like, you just feel it. You feel something under the surface that's much more interesting or intriguing or calling than what is happening on the surface. And for me, that's what poetry is. There's something much deeper going on here than just the black ink on the white paper. There's something underneath that, and that's what I feel in poetry all the time. And so like those three are some that are just, for me, are watch as many as I can and just feel that. And then how do I convert that into doc and into the work that I'm doing? And it's not being too dogmatic about it, because at the end of the day, like, I'm making entertainment and it's fun and I want people to have fun watching it, and I want these films to have a far reach. But it's identifying some of those tools of masters and how can I employ them into my specific scenario, my specific film, and my specific situation. So those are some that I just feel like they're poetry on a screen.
Are there poems that you return to over and over again?
Not necessarily poems, but I would say poets. Like Seamus Heaney is one that I am always reading, because he just elicits such a strong sense of time and place and feeling. And so I'll collect things and poems and or poets based on more like their body of work and what they're doing within this specific collection or this specific body of work. So it's more of like a tonal organization for me, rather than like specific poems or specific poets. But I would definitely, if anybody wants to like get vibe and tone and swagger, Seamus Heaney is a great one.
Do you have a group of poets or a poem that you'll assign to a certain type of project, or there's like a rhythm, a staccato?
There are some poems and poets. So for me, I'll be reading constantly. It's not a lot, because poems are easy and quick to read. I mean, you can go deep and spend a dissertation on one poem, but for me, it's just like read one here, read one there, have them at the ready. So there's always kind of this trickle for me with poetry. And then what I'll do is earmark things that I feel are like, ooh, this is very staccato, this is very rhythmic, this is a very like, you know, when Cummings is in his like super weird abstract where there's just like random words on a page and you're called to find the meaning. And all of a sudden I'll be cutting a scene that I feel like, oh, I should go reread that poem. And so for me, I'm trying to remember and segment things out. So I'm just kind of constantly absorbing. And then when I come upon a scene or a film or something, I'll go back to that well that it feels very akin to and kind of refresh myself and live in that poetry world for not the whole duration of the film or anything like that, but just like revisit it from time to time to like reconnect with like what pulled me in rhythmically and tonally to this poem. I can now see that through the lens of this film that I'm working on and try to pull in some of those qualities and attributes.
Is a timeline like a poem? I know you love timelines. You have them on your Instagram, just these beautiful works of art. It's really an art that you show these pictures.
Thanks. Yeah, I've never thought of it, but I love that. Yeah, I love that, because you can. There's something visually about. I mean, the first time you read a poem, you don't even read it. You just look at what it looks like on the page, the shape. Because it's not bound by grammar. The line breaks are intentional. The way it's presented on the page is intentional. You don't have to read a poem to start to kind of get a sense of what it is. And so when you're getting ready to read a poem, it's like, what does this look like? And I love that kind of, how that relates to the timeline, because as an editor and probably as a non-editor, you can look at a timeline and start to suss out some of the overall structures, pace and rhythm of structures of the film. And so I've never thought about it, but I can definitely see this kind of concept of a timeline being a visual representation of potentially the film from a very bird's eye meta standpoint. And then you can dive in deep and watch the film, or dive in deep and actually read the specifics of the film. And yeah, I mean, I love timelines, because for me, the timeline, it's showing all the micro decisions, all the little rabbit trails you went here, there, all the false starts, all the, you thought you were on the path. And I like to keep a lot of things on the timeline because I'll revisit them. I find if I start to delete too much stuff off the timeline, I'm always like, where did that shot go? And so I like to keep things on the timeline. And then I like to present the timelines, like on Instagram or on my website, because I think it's a great way for someone to just like set back and be like, this was intentional. Whether it's good or bad, we'll let the viewer decide. But at the very least, this was an intentional exploration into this theme or into this universe.